Hey folks, before we get started, I wanted to just jump on here and just give you a little heads up. We have had some microphone trouble in the previous couple of episodes and in this episode. First, it was Rachel's microphone, then it was my microphone for a couple weeks. So I just want you to know that this episode, you still have that little bit of a microphone issue where things just don't sound perfect. But I think we got that worked out for the next episode, and it's not so bad. You can't listen to it or anything, but just want to give you a heads up that it's something we're aware of and that we've addressed, and I think it's fixed for the next episode, but you'll have to endure it for this one more episode. Thanks, and enjoy the show.
Looking around, I finally see I think I need a change. The rat race, I wanna flee, my world I'll rearrange. I'm getting back to the roots of how it's meant to be. Growing gardens, picking fruit, racing livestock, living free. It's a modern homestead. Build a modern homestead.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Hornbrough, joined as usual by my co-host, Rachel Jamison. How you doing today, Rachel?
I'm doing pretty good.
Glad to have you here. You have a busy week on the homestead this week? I've seen some pictures. I've seen some things you were doing. Yeah, a lot going on.
We have tonight. We're supposed to freeze. So yeah,
already.
I got my sweatshirt on. It's
cold. I do too, but it's like 40s at night here.
Yeah, it's 40s during the day here.
Yeah, it's 60, about 61, I think, today here. So a little different.
And it's been raining. So I've been outside in the rain.
Oh, yeah.
Harvesting and pulling plants. The garden is done unless it tolerates a freeze.
Totally that way. You probably left a few things in there, didn't you?
I pulled the tomatoes yesterday and the rest of the peppers. What else did I pull? Oh, and some herbs I pulled.
When did you pick the last of your potatoes? I seen you post a picture on that earlier, like a couple days ago.
My big potato.
Yeah, big giant potato.
I did that. What is today? Today's Wednesday. I think that was Saturday.
Okay, I see a picture and I thought, well, that's a big potato.
That thing was huge. I mean, huge. Yeah, got some French fries there.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was out today, and everything's still doing all right because it isn't going to freeze yet. But I'm still picking lots of tomatoes. Still, so many peppers. Their peppers are actually going rotten out there because I don't even know what to do with them all. There's so many. I've been trying to give them away. I can't even find people to give them away to at this point.
I just started composting my cucumbers and my green beans. I mean, I took 3 bags of stuff over to people, and I just can't give it away. It's like, so
yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, that's what I've got peppers. I've just been, because they start going rotten on the plant, so I just take them off and throw them in the compost. Have you been doing any more preserving, or are you still doing things there?
I made pickled peppers.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, you made some apple juice? Okay.
Apple juice and pickled peppers.
I'm trying some a different kind of kale. I got some kale in the dehydrator to make some kale chips. I don't like plain kale chips all that much, but I tried doing some with some cinnamon, and I've tried doing some with something else. What else did I put on there? I can't remember now. Garlic, some garlic on some. Yeah, I just wanted to try some different, because I'm not a big. I've made them plain. I don't like them. But yeah, with some stuff on them, I think I'll like them all right.
Have you ever had nutritional yeast?
No. I've heard that you put that on kale.
Yeah, it's not bad to make. That's the only way I'll eat kale chips. I think I just like the nutritional yeast and not the kale chips.
I think the cinnamon will be pretty good. I buy the.
It'll be interesting.
It's the real cinnamon. What's that? I can't remember what it's called. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I put that on there.
I'll pronounce it.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it right either, so I can't remember exactly how it's spelled. But yeah, it's the real cinnamon, so I'll put some of that on there. Try that out and see how it does in the dehydrator. But yeah, other than that, yeah, picking some stuff and doing that and putting down laminate floor. I guess that's a homesteading thing, right? You gotta do your work on your house. I mean, you're doing your
handyman.
I've been doing that the last couple of days. Yeah, other than that, that's been homesteading this week. I mean, it's like I said, a little bit ago. Oh, I did get the rest of my. I uncovered the beds I had covered for a couple weeks, solarizing them, and I did get down the rest of my cover crop seed.
Nice.
So I put that down. So I'm anxious to see. But now I might have to water because there's like no rain in the forecast for like several days. So I'm probably gonna have to actually water it. It's easy to forget this time of the year to water things because you're at the end, and I'm not thinking about watering stuff out there to get it going. And it's I have to make myself get out there and do that.
So did you plant any garlic? Because I planted garlic.
I seen you did, and I haven't yet.
Yeah.
I was giving you a hard time about it, and I haven't put any of the ground.
Well, you're
maybe next week
behind me, but I planted.
Yeah.
That's why I was in a hurry to get my potatoes out.
Yeah. And I seen you wrote a blog post about garlic too. So we'll have to send people over to your website, rewilderlife.com.
Yes, rewilderlife.com.
See, I have to remember. I know it. I can type it out. But then when I have to think about saying it, it's what is it again? I've been to it a few times. I went and checked out your garlic. Yeah, I went and checked out the garlic post. Pretty good stuff.
Yeah, we did lots of stuff with it. I this is my third year with the bulbets, so that'll be bulbills.
Yeah.
So
I feel like you're a seasoned blogger now. You've put up like 4 posts now, I think, and you're well on your way.
Keep it going.
You're doing a great job. I love the blog. It's looking good. But yeah, I didn't write any blog posts this week. It's just been a busy week around here working inside the house, getting stuff done. But it was a good week for it. It was a little cooler. Like you said, the temperature has really changed here, and things have dropped. And it's not as bad as yours, but definitely the nights have been getting cold.
It was like a switch went off up here. It's like, oh, it's fall. Click.
First day, yeah, it dropped down. I think 41 the first day here that night, and it was like, yep, here we are. So it started.
I ended up digging up my special peppers and putting them in buckets.
Did you?
Inside. Yep, and I brought in my rosemary tree.
Did they handle the transfer okay?
Well, I just did it yesterday. So,
okay.
Yeah, and then I brought my rosemary bush in. Here the rosemary won't live through the winter. Mm-hmm. So this is this rosemary. It's the second year inside.
Okay.
So, yep. And I figured out that it likes humidity.
I've been thinking about a lot of things about planting some stuff out too. My greenhouse is set empty also. I cleaned it completely out. I took all the shelving out of it. I covered the floor in cardboard, so no grass because it's a dirt floor. And I didn't know what I was going to do. Because my plan, I'm really been contemplating making it into a full aquaponics greenhouse and then keeping it heated all winter and running aquaponics and growing stuff in there for the winter. And I thought it'd be a neat project. It'd be just fun to build it and just give me some stuff to write about and talk about, even just for fun. Even I really enjoy doing aquaponics, and I've had thoughts about turning that entire greenhouse, just making it fully aquaponic. And I'm thinking I might go that route. I've been really, instead of putting the system up, the indoor system I usually put up, I've thought about just doing that and making it into a full functioning year-round aquaponic system and trying to keep things going in there. So that's been on my plans.
I'd be excited to follow that journey.
Yeah, it would be all new to me as far as doing it outside in the greenhouse. Year-round, I think there would be challenges, but I think it would be a lot of fun too. I think it would actually help to heat it too, having that thermal mass of the water in there.
Right.
I don't think it would be as hard to heat as.
What fish did you?
Well, before in the indoor when I was just using goldfish.
Okay.
Honestly, but yeah, now in the one I did built outside, the IBC tote one, I had bluegill and perch and catfish in that. 3 different times I had the 3 fish in that. So I've had
those
bigger.
Handle colder temperatures.
Yeah, they do good. I would love to do tilapia, but here, I mean, they just barely have enough time to grow. And if anything goes wrong, you don't have time. If you get a late start, I actually ordered them one year, and they delayed the shipping. And I ended up canceling the order because 4 weeks went by. They still hadn't shipped them. It was delayed. And I was like, I'm just pushing it too far now. So I just canceled the order and went back with, I think that's the year I went catfish in there. So yeah, just
speaking of which, we went and watched them harvest some salmon. Well, it wasn't all salmon. Now there was a few other fish in there, because they were doing it for the DNR.
Yeah.
And that was pretty fun to watch them do that.
What, just net them out, or they
come up over the weir, and then there's a spot where I'm not even sure if they come up over the weir. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but up here along the river, they'll come up the river, and then they'll trap them, and they use, it's not really netting. It looks like metal fencing, basically.
Oh, really?
It's all, what do you call it? Like they use a machine that they built to kind of put them up and down these rows in there and get them into where they harvest them.
Okay.
It was really
And what do they do with them after they harvest?
These ones were going for dog food.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
the DNR does all that, huh?
Huge. Here, the DNR does that. Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah.
And then of course they take some of them and they take their eggs and stuff, and they'll put them back into the river. And
so they go all out on the management of them for sure. No, they don't just let it happen naturally. They fully manage it.
Well, some of these, I don't even know if they're to Michigan.
Okay.
Some of them, but there was one that I think I'm going to post in the front porch, because I was going to try to make a blog post about it, but I don't think I can because of the video quality is not that great, but people might find it interesting. But it was really interesting to watch them, the way they bring them in and they sort them out. And there was a few rare fish in there that they had brought in. So
interesting.
Rare salmon, and those weren't as big, and I can't remember what they were called. They had a hump on their back.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember what they're called either, but I've seen them. Yeah.
So it was pretty fascinating. Made me want to have my canning jars full of salmon, but unfortunately, you can't buy it. That was all going for dog food. Plus, they were all, at this point, they're old enough that you wouldn't want to eat them anyway.
Yeah, I've seen, that they start, they start not looking so good.
They're ugly looking.
Yeah. You mentioned the front porch. I feel like we mention that all the time, and we don't tell people what that is. If you're a new listener and you don't know what the Homestead Front Porch is, that's our Facebook group, private Facebook group on Facebook that you can join. There's always links, either links from where we answer questions on the podcast, or I'll actually put a link, or you can find a link to it at redemptionpermaculture.com, which is my website. And you can just, there's a couple questions you answer yes to, and you're in. And we'd love to have people in there. There's a lot of good conversation going on in there. So come be a part of the Homestead Front Porch Facebook group.
Come join us.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll jump into our topic for today, which is planning out and adding useful garden infrastructure. And it's kind of a long title, but it's a good time to think about it. We're at the end of the year here, our gardening season here in the Northern Hemisphere. I've been aware lately that there are a lot of people in Australia that listen to us.
Really?
So I guess it's not that time of the year for them. Yeah. So it's different for them. But here we're planning out, we're thinking about next year's garden already. So, I mean, what are we going to put in our garden? Or maybe you're building a new garden. Maybe you're new to homesteading. Maybe you're new to gardening, and you're wondering what kind of infrastructure do I need to put in? We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Just the kind of things maybe you need to plan out, things you need to add. You don't have to add all these things, but these are a lot of things that I like having in my garden, and some things that I plan on adding in the future as we build more gardens and grow a bigger garden. I think it's neat to have good infrastructure. It's important to have good infrastructure. You can till out a garden, plant your stuff, and grow food. It's that simple. But there's things you can do to make it better, more efficient, get a better harvest, just a lot of things. There's a lot of reasons to put in different infrastructure. Make your job easier. A lot of it is about that. We'll just talk about some of those things today. And I thought we'd start off talking about fence, because I like having fence. I don't have a fence around my biggest garden right now, and it's. I noticed the difference having a fence, not having a fence there, than having a fence on the other part of my garden. But there's a lot of reasons to have a fence, and what's some of the reasons you like to have it? Do you have a fence around your garden, Rachel?
I do. I have my property here, and then we have the property we have a fence around our orchard.
Yeah.
We actually have two fences because our orchard is split by a driveway because of deer.
Yeah.
And then we have a fence here, even though we're in town, we have deer here. So
really?
Fence. Yeah, but we don't have a permanent fence, which is for us been a good thing because we've moved it around a lot.
Okay.
We've moved how big the garden was. And so for us, it's worked. It also has its cons, but we do have a fence. And we have found we didn't used to have a fence. The years that we didn't have a dog, we 100% needed a fence. now that we have a dog again, we don't seem to be having as many issues with rabbits or deer.
Yeah.
Like we used to.
Do you have a problem with the dog tearing things up in the garden?
Not our dog, but
Not your dog. Some people do have that problem. We had some dogs that definitely, matter of fact, I had blueberry bushes in my backyard. I had this one dog that was, I don't know if he had a personal vendetta against blueberry bushes because he ripped every one of them out of the ground. I mean, he was a schnauzer.
Really?
I mean, not a miniature schnauzer, but he got every one of these things by the trunk and pulled them out of the ground. And I couldn't believe it. I was just like, he went straight for him. He just hated them. I don't know what it was.
So Scout is more likely to eat. He ate most of the raspberries this summer.
Oh, really? Just eating stuff. But yeah.
When we're out at the property, he'll eat the wild blackberries.
Well, he probably have all those he wants. You got a lot of those out there.
He hasn't ruined anything, but I will say neighbor dogs or our road is a one-way in and one-way out road. So a lot of people will walk their dogs up and down the road. And then people will let their dogs just kind of roam. And that's been our bigger issue is unaccompanied dogs or people letting their dog go to the bathroom in the garden.
Yeah, I've had that issue before. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I think about fence for a lot of problems like that, like deer, of course. Rabbits are a big issue for a lot, especially urban and suburban gardeners. They're huge. And they're not always easy to keep out. And it takes a special kind of fence to keep both out. With rabbits, you can have a lot lower, but they can dig under a fence too. So you're better almost burying a fence so they can't dig under. But if you can do that, I don't do that. We have wooden. The part that I do have fenced off, it's a wood fence. It's like a ranch style fence. And what I do is I just came up on the inside of it. And we don't have deer here. It's not where I'm at. We just don't have a deer pressure here. So, but I do have about 3 foot high fence that I attach to the inside of the wood fence. So it's on the bottom of it and it goes across the bottom just to keep the rabbits out of the garden inside the fence. And like I said, the big garden doesn't have any protection. And I did see some pressure in there. Matter of fact, it was weird because I was getting ready to cut our corn stalks down just for decoration because I harvested all the corn, left the corn out there. We were just going to cut them down. We're still going to do some of them, but something got in there and mutilated the corn stalks. I don't know what it was, but they're laying down. They're chewed up. Like, I don't know if it was a raccoon or what it was, but something was eating.
Or raccoon,
We have groundhog here. I don't know if he would have chewed on the corn stalks or not, maybe. But something definitely tore those up. But again, we already harvested the food, but it was just interesting that something got in there and tore those up. But so you do get pressure like that. Could have just been a dog out there and went crazy.
Squirrels are our biggest issue. Squirrels. But when I was digging my potatoes, I did find rabbit poop. But I was like, it's okay now. The garden's done. You can fertilize all you want. There's
not a fence that'll keep a squirrel out.
No,
you can do netting. We can talk about that in a little bit. Netting will keep them out. Can't keep them out. Netting can keep. Is netting what you're using for your deer on your temporary fence, or do you have an actual?
Temporary fence is a 7-foot tall net.
Yeah, and you just put posts up
because there's no fencing out there tall enough to keep deer out unless you go very high.
Yeah,
so that's why we chose the netting.
Sure.
We have before we expanded the garden again, because we had shrunk the garden, and then COVID came, and we decided to expand the garden again, and we had cattle panel up, which actually works really well because my husband could weed whack against it with weeds and then on top of the cattle panel we had put the netting just because we have to have it 7 feet taller. The deer will just go right over it. But now we've taken the cattle panel down and we just have the netting up.
Okay. And that can work for a lot of things. Like I said, you can even, if you wanted to cover the top of the garden, you could, if you wanted to make almost like an arbor over it or something, and net it all in and keep squirrels and everything out. I've never had to go to those kind of extremes. We have squirrels, but we don't have a bunch of anything that's actually destroying our garden. It was funny because my daughter and son-in-law, they have a bunch of walnut trees. And so we brought a whole bunch of walnut trees. I don't have walnut trees here. And I was like, I want the walnuts, so I spread them out. I have like a mulch area all over here on the side of the house. And I spread those walnuts all out, let them dry really good. And I just kind of left them there for several weeks and let them dry. And some squirrels came in there and they were carrying them things off right and left. Now they're everywhere. I find them, I trip over them, I'm stepping on them
Hopefully
everywhere.
you're not going to find them in your car.
Yeah, I could possibly. But what's funny is this was spring, and about middle of summer, I was seeing little tiny walnut trees popping up because they were planting them, and some of them were growing. Oh no, I don't want walnut trees near my garden because
they're messy.
Well, not just that, but they can actually. Yeah, they juggling, and then they can juggling, and they can. It will inhibit the growth of other stuff, and so I don't want them because I don't have enough property for that really. If I had a large property, I'd love to have them, but
well, that's what the squirrels do with acorns here, and so we have, which drives my husband crazy because we have mulch in his flower beds, and the squirrels are digging all the mulch out all over the place and making a huge mess and burying the acorns. But the good what took me down that rabbit trail was that the good thing was it kept them from eating my garden. They were eating them walnuts. They were just grabbing the walnuts and running, and they weren't bothering the garden at all. So you need to plant like what do they call that? A catch crop,
That's
my problem. Maybe that's what I need to do is plant some melons, not in my garden for the squirrels.
There you go. This is all for you. You can have these and stay out of my garden. Yeah. So anyway, fencing though will work, but you have to go to pretty big extremes to keep deer out. Like you said, it's got to be really tall. Yeah. With rabbits, they can dig under. So you got to kind of go low and you got to go deep. So there's just things you got to do with fencing. But I love having fencing. I love having the separation and the privacy, even if it's not like a complete privacy fence. There's just this level of like, these are my borders. This is the privacy. This is my yard. And it just will keep people from coming into your yard. It'll keep people from walking their pets up into your yard. In an urban homestead, it's really important to have these kind of borders, these barriers that just say, we like you, but you can't come in my yard, And I what is it they say about, what makes good neighbors? So good fences make good neighbors, and there's a lot of truth to that too. It's like you like people, but you need your privacy, you need your space.
Even on our very rural land, because our rural land, we get lots of snow up here, and one part of the road, it's not even, you can't even get down in the winter. Mm-hmm. But those fences we get lots of people trespassing.
Yeah,
and and not just that, even for animals. I mean, I was reading one of Joel Salatin's books, and he talks about even if you use what do they call it? The netting, the movable netting,
mm-hmm.
He still suggests having parts of your property that have permanent fencing, for animals, because your animals are your responsibility. So fencing is huge, and that's but it's also can be a big expense. And
for the garden, I just think it's, like I said, I was like having the definition and the division, and this is a garden area, and obviously it does a lot to keep things out. So that's just the first thing.
You can use your fencing for. I mean, it's pretty, but you can also utilize it.
Yeah, it kind of brings us to the next piece of infrastructure, which is trellises. You can use a fence. I use my fence for trellis. I mean, I grow things up the side of it. Always have. I mean, everything if there's anything planted along next to the fence, it's the fence is a trellis for it. And it gets pretty messy. And what's bad about that is when it's time if you have wire fencing, which I do attach to my wood fencing, like I told you for the rabbits, and then stuff vines up through that, ripping that out in the fall is really hard without bending your fence all up.
That's what I'm going through right now with my beans, because I use I put a link in the show notes, but I use netting with
you can't. It's hard to break that.
You have to wait till the things die, so you can pull it apart.
It has to really get dry so it can break it out without busting the netting. Because that's what I find with the fencing. I mean, you'll pull it and it'll bend those wire out in the fencing. So you have to be careful about that. But I do use it for that. But I love having trellises. When you're limited on space like you and I are, we have to grow up. I mean, we have to really, we have to think about running things up trellises a lot, even stuff that you normally maybe wouldn't run up a trellis. I mean, I grow a lot of things up trellises. And there's just a lot of different kinds of trellises. I have wood trellises that I made. You can use lattice for that. You can just make I made these cool little, they're just really small beds. They're like 1 foot wide and 4 feet long. And I just grow beans in them. And I put I just made me a 2x4 frame on the back, about 8 foot tall, and I put a piece of a lattice in there, and it makes a great trellis for beans. And I grew cucumbers. Excuse me, what was that?
Is it wood lattice?
Wood trellis. Yeah, I put a wood trellis up, and I grow cucumbers and I grow beans on them every year, and it works really, really well. And like I said, you don't need a big space to grow them in. And I just plop those. What was neat is I have a chain link fence on one side of my yard, so neighbors there, where it's more private on the other side because we have a barn and stuff the other side. But I put those right along that chain link fence, and so I got these 8-foot trellis, sections up. It builds a privacy wall also, which is kind of nice. So it gives you this like green wall, of green beans, cucumbers along that fence. But I'm away from the fence a little bit, but it gives us a lot of privacy by growing it like that.
Yeah, my husband made the hollow metal conduit that you use for wiring and stuff. Well, he took that, and you can buy conduit benders.
Mm-hmm.
He took that and bent it, and then it's sticking into the ground. We put it in the ground with re-rod that he put.
The rebar, yeah.
Rebar, yeah. I said rebar. And then we have that netting, and we move those all over the garden. And some of those,
nice.
I'll have to post a picture, but I have my beans climbing up those, and I made like a tunnel with those. But people use cattle panels.
Oh, so you put like several of them in a row, hooped, and use them almost like hoops in a garden, but just taller.
And we've had those. Probably 10 or 12 years now, but he also made some rounded ones. And then we have some that we made as trellises. Just they last forever because it's metal.
Yeah, it really, and it's pretty inexpensive. I mean, conduit is pretty inexpensive, and like I said, it'll last forever.
The netting that I bought has usually lasts me 3 or 4 years before it starts to rot.
Yeah, it's a really good frugal way of doing it. A lot of people are going cattle panels. A few gardeners on YouTube have made that really popular to make the cattle panel arches, and it's neat. Yeah. And they don't look great when they're empty, but once things start growing up over them,
pretty when they're empty. I mean,
they don't look great empty, but when they fill up, they look fine. They look great. Everything's hanging down there, and it makes it easy to harvest, and they look nice, and you can walk under them, and it's pretty neat look once they're full.
We use cattle panels as the shorter trellises.
Mm-hmm.
Not for like beans. I've used those like this year. I used them for melons and cucumbers.
Just ran them straight, and did you arch them? They're like
3.5 feet tall, and we just run them straight.
Yeah.
And we put the T-post. I think that's like every homesteader and gardener's best friend right there. The T-post.
Yeah, having some T-posts and some cattle panels both will give you a lot of.
And we just wire those. We move them all over the garden, depending on where I put stuff.
I think I mentioned this to you last week, but not on the recording. But I seen a person that they saved all their old grapevines, like they pruned their grapevines back, and they saved all their old grapevines and stuff. And then when they built those panels, because they don't look all that great when they're empty, they actually tied the grapevines on the metal parts of the fence and made it look like it was a grapevine archway, but then stuff would grow over it. So it looked good when it was empty. It looked nice, and it's important to get it looking nice, I think. I mean, in some situations, I mean, some people don't care, but I like to keep things looking like that. Yeah.
I think a lot of people use grapevines or willow to do that wattle fencing.
Mm-hmm. The wattle fencing.
My dream is to do something with that.
I've seen entire raised beds built out of those, and that's pretty neat too. They'll just build the whole sides out of those. I don't know how long it would last, because it's not, you're using pretty thin branches, so I don't know that it would last for long on a raised bed.
Yeah, I know we made raised beds out of pallets, and those lasted like 4 or 5 years. I
think mine about 5 years. I think mine started coming. I think a couple of them I tore down at like 5, and then I used a couple of them another year.
I'd like to try that new burn method and see if maybe it would last longer. Not the new one, but the one that I'm now aware of. It's
been around for 1,000 years. But I think that's what I've been doing with some stuff in the garden. If I'm putting in borders or anything, I've been doing that because it brings out the natural oils in the wood. It kind of helps protect it. It keeps bugs off of it from eating it. Does a few things. So it's a good way to do it.
I can't remember what it's called, but for the podcast, it's like
I can't either. I did a whole blog post about different methods for preserving woods. It's one of my mentions.
Yeah, you use like a flame weeder or something, and you go along the wood, and you get it to look charcoal. You don't like burn it up, but you get it to look charcoaly, and then you rough it up. You have.
I personally think it's a pretty good look too. I think it looks nice too when they do it.
It does. When I was managing a store, we had shelves built out of it, and it was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I like building arbors and pergolas. I kind of use them interchangeably. I think they're a little bit different. One's more. I think a pergola is
that the one that's flat at the top?
Flat, and generally, and an arbor is ours generally. But yeah, I built a pergola, I guess, if we're using those definitions, for my grape vineyard, and it's got. I put 4 posts up, and I bought cheap posts. I bought like landscape chemicals and used them for posts. And I put 4 posts up, and I actually just laid a cattle panel, 4x8 cattle panel. So it's an 8-foot long pergola. I keep wanting to say arbor, a pergola with the 4 posts. So it's 8 foot long, and I spaced 4 foot, and I just laid it flat across there and nailed it to the top of those posts. And then I grew that up and it works great. Actually, it's I got a post in the middle, kind of holding up the center too, where the actual vine comes up, or the plant comes up, and it's worked great for years. I've had it there for a long time, and it's been working fantastic. I don't take nothing down; I just leave it there. So that's a good
on our list for next year, because we have grapes that we put in, but I haven't put any thing for them to climb on yet.
Yeah, that's worked really well. I actually went around the sides too, and all but one side where I could walk under it, but I actually enclosed it with fencing too. And I've been growing stuff using that as a trellis on the sides of the pergola to grow things on the inside of there with the grapes. And but it has to be a little more shade loving, because it gets pretty shady, when I grow stuff there. But yeah, it works pretty good. Yeah. There's some things that will vine up and grow there. I mean, one end of it's more sunny than the other, so I can grow more stuff in there.
That's been on my list for a while to make one, and
when I first put it up, I actually had this idea of just enclosing it completely and putting quail, make a quail pen under there, like just let them run kind of crazy under there, and just turn them loose and just let them do their thing. But I never got around to that. But that was kind of my thought when I did, because I thought, well, they could clean that up, fertilize the grapes. I mean, they could do a lot. And I think it would work, but I just haven't got around to doing that.
That's a good idea, and that's like a function stacking.
Yeah, function stack it, use it for several different things. You have trellises on the outside. You can plant like some comfrey and things like that from the munch on the inside, because they're not going to probably kill it unless you have just a way over abundance of quail in there.
How to create shade for either chickens or rabbit.
Yep. And that grapevine provides a lot of shade.
In the summer, of course, and then in the winter, they need the opposite up here.
Yeah.
And that would be perfect. A living shade would be perfect, because they die back.
I think it would still work. I mean, it's something I might do in the future. I still haven't got around to doing it. But yeah, I have been thinking about that for a long time. But you can build things like that. And it's just great to use those to trellis things up. It's another way of just trellising up and creating this, when you got that overhead, I've seen a lot of people grow loofahs like that, gourds like that.
Yeah, I did loofahs last year.
Yeah.
On an arch, and then they just hang down. It looks really cool.
Yeah, it does. I think it's really neat to walk through a tunnel. I mentioned last week how those pumpkins that the rabbits planted, where you can walk through there, and they were all just hanging down from the top. So it's kind of a neat thing too. But cool. Yeah, there's lots of ways to grow vertically.
I did a lot of.
Yeah, I built several too. I built like a long one. It wasn't really traditional, like teepee, like 3 posts or whatever. I built I just brought 2 of them together, like all the way down in a long row, and then ran a pole across the top all the way down the center. Yeah. So I made like this really long,
I did that last year with my beans, and it looked very primitive because I used thicker sticks, but
I used bamboo. I used the bamboo posts on mine.
Yeah. Everybody commented how it looked like a old fashioned garden when they walked by, because I get a lot of people that walk by and talk to me.
Yeah, mine's out there right now. It's the same way. And I get people mentioning, talking about it too. It's out there in the front, kind of in my front yard even.
I should do it again, but everybody really liked it. So yeah.
It works really well. I actually, because I didn't want to, you could have built more bamboo sticks. I could have just made it all wood or whatever. But I actually just took string, and I went across it with nylon string and just made my fence basically you could use netting or something like that, but I actually just took string and tied rows across it all the way down and just made it for it to climb up, and it worked really well. So, I could just cut it all off there when I'm done with it.
Well, and the nice thing about sticks is, what I used was just sticks that we cut off. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's super frugal.
Yeah. If you've got sticks, you can just cram them in the ground. It works great. Bamboo will last a long time. I can reuse those, which is nice. It's pretty inexpensive to buy.
Yeah, it does last. I have some too, and it lasted quite a while before it started to fall apart.
And I just cram, like I'll take, I grow pole beans up a straight pole. I'll just cram one bamboo stick right there to plant, let it go straight up the pole, and just kind of go climb up that one pole. And that works really well too. So, and I also use it to grow cucumbers on. I mean, there's lots of things you can do. But I think the conduit, when you're thinking about something that lasts, I mean, because there's cheap and there's inexpensive, and it's not always, being frugal doesn't always mean you just go the cheapest route. Like there's a ways to go the cheapest route.
Right.
But you think about the conduit, you can spend a little bit of money, but it lasts you for years and years. So I think that's a really good thing to do.
I think we're going to do more of it too, especially. So I want to make some that for row covers.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, because of pests, especially, I think both of us have had issues with the cabbage.
You mean use conduit to make the hoops?
Yeah, to make the hoops, and then my floating row cover can go over that.
I think that's a good idea because
netting over it, because I had so many issues this year with my cabbage, with the cabbage moths.
And I think using conduit for that's a good idea too, because the hoops you buy just aren't big enough. It's hard to find hoops that are big enough for when that stuff gets fully mature. Like it's fine when you've got the small plants in there, but as those things grow and get bigger, if you want to leave netting on and stuff, you're going to need something a lot bigger than that.
I bought hoops, and one with shade cloth, and they weren't, like, by the time my plants were several weeks old, the shade cloth the hoops were too short. Yeah, that's how I kind of got into that mess this year. I got the biggest hoops I could get, and still by the end of the season, they were, halfway through the season, I pretty much had to pull them because they were starting to grow around the hoops. Well, and the conduit you can buy just anywhere. You can go to the hardware store, you get in long sticks, and
the vendor isn't that expensive. I mean, none of that's really expensive. It's, but it is a little bit expensive up front, but then you got it for years. You can just keep continuing to use it.
Yep.
So that's a good idea. I like to put in another piece of infrastructure that's really important to me. It's just something I put a lot of emphasis on, and it probably usually it is the first thing I put down before I even plant gardens is a path. I put down paths. Mm-hmm. I want to define my garden. I want access into each garden bed, and I want to be able to walk in my garden every day without compacting the soil. I want to have access to get in there with wheelbarrows or whatever. And I just want to be able to take like little mini nature walks through my property and walk the paths. I love to have the paths in there. I find that having the paths around your gardens will help with weed control, because grass, if you're planting directly in the ground, grass will just kind of walk into your garden. But if you have that a couple foot of path all the way around your garden, it prevents a lot of that. And it creates a lot of edge. And in permaculture, edge is important. Edge is where life is. Things love edge, and I've done a whole podcast on the edge effect in permaculture, and it's something I've witnessed it time and time again. I love to create as much edge as I can. That's why I even create a lot of meandering paths, because you get more edge that way. And now the big garden I built, it's actually got straight paths kind of crisscrossing through it. But when I'm doing the stuff in the backyard or whatever, I like to create meandering paths. And so there's a few ways you can do paths. I've got several different ways here. We have a gravel path, comes down through our main, right along our house, all the way into our backyard. It goes off through the vineyard area where we have some trees and the grapevines. So that's gravel. We do mulch. Mulch is great. Gravel's great for a while, but weeds will start coming up, and seeds will get in gravel.
Yeah, we've done both mulch and gravel, and the gravel, and we ended up having to, one of the uses for our flame weeder has been for the gravel, because we're getting weeds in it. Yeah. I
think the mulch in a lot of ways is better than the gravel. The gravel looks great, but once the weed seeds get in there, the good thing about mulch is you can always pick and add more mulch to it. Just keep deepening your mulch and add to it. You can't really do that with gravel. It's there. It's not going anywhere. It's not disintegrating. The soil's not eating it. It's just going to sit there. And when weeds start popping up through that, you think I can just dump more gravel on it. You have to try to get to the and even if we put down landscape fabric into our gravel walkways, pretty heavy.
So
And about 2 years in, it started coming through that.
Yeah, the seeds I think just fall in there.
Yes.
Yep.
When I do the cardboard, when I do the mulch pads, I just lay down a couple layers of cardboard, and then I just continue to add mulch. And I got to tell you, it does just as well as the gravel as far as holding up, and better really than the gravel as far as keeping weeds out.
Do you guys get lots of leaves?
The leaves?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We do have a hard time sometimes with the mulch when it comes fall for removing leaves. So, but my husband likes to use
raking it up. I mean,
yeah, raking them up. The mulch just kind of sometimes it's a little bit harder, but yeah.
I guess where I have those paths, I don't really have that big an issue with that. But like I said, in the spring, I usually put down a whole nother 4 or 5 inches of mulch in the spring. I mean, I go through a lot of mulch.
Right.
And so we're putting down a lot of that. But yeah, I like doing that. Like I said, gravel stones, like your slate stone or your flag.
Oh, those are pretty. I would love to do that, but
I love that. It's expensive. It can be really expensive unless you live in an area where that stuff's just everywhere, where you can just walk out in nature and grab some of it or whatever. But here where I'm at, it isn't common, so you have to order or buy it, and it's expensive. And I do think it's really nice. Pavers are much cheaper. The flat pavers, you buy it like your big box.
We had those for a while and we took them back out because
those are nice.
Same with the grass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just cut out the grass, lay them down, and let the grass I'll keep a little gap around them and let it kind of fill in the gaps with grass or whatever, and then mow but I always sink them so I can just mow over it, and that way it just makes like this sunken path into the grass that you can walk along, which is nice. It works pretty well, and we've got some of that around here. We've got all kinds of different paths. I love paths, and then you can also, I mean, if you want to go fully into it, you could actually put down concrete paths. It's expensive, going to last for decades. It's going to last a long time. But you can use, if you want a cheaper way, you can actually use broken concrete and make what permaculture people like to call urbanite, and turn it over and make like this, make your broken concrete. And you can use that and kind of do what I was saying about sinking it like you would the pavers into the ground a little bit and let the grass kind of grow up around it. I have found, though, that just using like grass or clover pathways,
that works.
Kind of nice. You don't, it'll walk into your garden a little bit, but it's actually easier to maintain. You just mow it, and clover is really nice.
It's great, too.
Yeah. Clover is really nice because you get that benefit. The benefits of clover, I mean, it's like if you use white clover, it's a perennial, but it has the benefits of, the nitrogen effects and things like that. So you're cutting it, it's releasing nitrogen. So, I mean, that stuff is feeding the soil around it, even on the edges of the paths, pathways.
One of my friends has wood paths, like actual built wood paths.
Yeah, that'd be really nice. Again,
it actually looks really pretty.
Price of lumber right now, that'd be a
you wouldn't
real expensive way to go about it.
But
yeah,
that's why, like right now, I mean, thrifty would be the grass or the clover.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have a wood chipper and you have the ability to chip like branches and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've actually gotten to where I feel like that using like clover or mulch is my best options now. I mean, but even with mulch, if you got access to a lot of mulch, that's fine. If you don't, then probably just leaving grass. Or I like clover. I would try to pull out the grass and get clover planted down. It's going to stay lower. It's going to require less maintenance, and it's got benefits that grass doesn't have. It's going to feed the soil.
Rabbits, could you make it wide enough that the rabbits could tractor down that and eat that clover?
Absolutely. That'd be a really good function stack there of doing that. Now you're going to have to walk on that, so you're going to have some droppings and things like that too. But if you don't mind that. If you moved them every day and didn't have a lot of rabbits, it wouldn't be a big deal. Right. But yeah, if you had too many and didn't move it enough, it could definitely get pretty messy.
We have the dog pile issue, so rabbit poop's no big deal.
No, it'll just squish into the ground. I love a podcast when we're talking to homesteaders because they get us, Rachel. We talk about smashing rabbit poop with our shoes into the ground. Doesn't offend anybody on a podcast like this.
No.
You couldn't talk on a normal podcast like this.
Well, I mean, rabbit poop is such a fertilizer bomb that,
Yeah.
And I
absolutely.
love the function stacking. I think anything,
Me too.
We've talked about this before, but when you have such a small space, you have to really plan things out and think about it. If you're going to have, like you have quail and your quail tractor.
Yep.
I think having a small space has actually helped me be a better planner now that we have a bigger space, because we have to plan so far ahead.
You have to be really intentional about every single thing you do on a small space. And that's why I feel like so many urban homesteaders, urban permaculture people have such a well-functioning system on their properties, because you have to have it. I mean, if you're going to grow in abundance, I mean, you're going to have to cram that stuff in there, and it's going to have to be functioning, at peak performance. And you have to function stack everything. And it runs like a well-oiled machine, really, when it's
I mean,
working
and my
right.
yard could be much more productive than it is, and it's pretty productive if I took the rest of the grass out.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do. And that's why it fascinates me. I mean, I would love to have a big property out in the country, but it also fascinates me to do a lot with a small property. I think it's fun to see what you can do, because honestly, I'm doing a ton of stuff here, and there's so much more I could be doing. I mean, honestly, there's just so much more.
Same here.
Yeah.
We could be doing a lot more.
And it's amazing to me that you can do that much on a small piece of property. And I just don't think most people don't think about, or they just don't understand what can be accomplished on a property that, property size.
Short of having a cow.
Yeah, you're not going to do large livestock.
Probably about the only animal, maybe a sheep or a lamb. But I mean, there's people that have goats in town, and a lamb's about the same size as a goat. So.
I wouldn't have a pig on a property in town.
Maybe
I wouldn't do a pig either. I mean, you can definitely do small goats. You could definitely do it. There's people who do goats. There's the people who do, I mean, like I said, chickens, rabbits, quail. I mean, all the small stuff, ducks.
Yep.
I've seen ducks on urban properties. I mean, there's a lot you can do with animals, and it's amazing if you plan it correctly, how many trees you can get on a small property and still have a large garden. You have to be really intentional about where you put stuff because of shade. But it's amazing how you can do it and grow so much. And you can cut things low and keep things down where you can reach them so it doesn't shade things out. I mean, there's just so much you can do there. But again, we're getting off topic.
Yeah, we are.
Borders are something I like to put in. Again, creates edge effect, creates definition, separates things, helps with weed control. You can use rocks, bricks, retaining wall blocks, wood, and even build raised beds. Raised beds are a border. I mean, they really are. They're just an elevated border. That's what they are.
We have several retaining walls here because our property is a hill.
Mm-hmm.
So we have several that we.
Yeah, you're using it for erosion control.
Yeah, we're using it for erosion control, and then in there we've planted food and flowers. But yeah, and one of our big raised beds, I guess we have Jerusalem artichoke, some herbals like echinacea.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my raspberries in there.
Okay. Yeah. It's all infrastructure that I think's nice to have. Like I said, you don't have to go full blown raised beds, but you could just put, like I said, bricks and it just gives you that definition.
Are bricks.
Yeah.
Those are actual.
Like the retaining wall or
these are
regular,
pretty,
just like regular bricks. And what's nice is a lot of times you can get those for free. You can look for people who are ripping out a chimney or a road, just brick road.
We drove rebar down in and we filled some of the cores to keep it because it's a pretty tall one.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can use, I've seen people use concrete block. Even.
Yeah. You can do a lot of things.
It look nice. It's kind of that, right now that whole industrial look is in. I mean, if you combine some of that concrete block with some of the burned wood, I think you can.
Don't look I like too much, but it does. Yeah. It functions. If it functions well for you, if you like that look, if you don't mind it, there's really inexpensive ways to do a lot of this stuff.
New industrial look that a lot of people really like. Yep.
I like the wood and the classic, old timey stuff myself. That's my style. But for some people, though,
I've seen a lot of really cool, more modern looking gardens with some of the raised.
Yeah, there's some people who love that. Yeah, and it works well for them. This is also the time, if you're going to put in irrigation, thinking about your irrigation, start thinking about what you're going to need to buy, where you're going to put it, plan it out. Even before you put a path in, really, irrigation should go in before that. You should really think about where your irrigation is going to be, where your garden beds are going to be, and then path around that. Laying down your water lines. I think about, of course, some people just like to have a faucet near their gardens, where they can hook up hoses and stuff. So they might want to run lines out for that, hook up some and dig that, run their lines out, put a faucet out there where they can hook to. It's a good time to put in your drip irrigation. figure all that out, get that laid down if you want that. I don't have any drip irrigation.
Yeah, I don't either.
And I think it would be a huge time saver. It'd be nice. It's not something I've planned out, but I think it'd be a good idea in some instances to have something like that. You put in the notes, rain barrels and totes. It is a good time to place those and think about where you're going to have your water supply, where you're going to collect it, where it's going to feed to, where it's, and how it's going to work.
Yeah.
It's just a good time to put in that infrastructure before you start putting in the whole garden.
Right.
Have that pre-planned. It's a good idea. It's good. It's a good infrastructure to have. In that same note, you can do the more natural permaculture way and put in your swales, your reservoirs, your ditches. All those things are important. Everybody think, well, swales, you don't want a ditch. You want to keep water on your property. Well, I've seen some properties that want ditches because you want to get that water off there because they got so much water collecting, and you need to actually put in ditches to keep your garden from flooding out.
That's our property. We actually dug a couple of those because the water comes down our road, hits our driveway, and just creates a river through our garden. Yeah,
so sometimes it just depends on your needs. Everybody in permaculture talks about swales all the time, but there's a time to get rid of the water too if it's too much. So you need a combination of both.
The rain just falls from the sky a lot.
Yeah, me too. Indiana, we don't usually, except for this year, we have plenty of it. This is the time to think about those things. Where are you going to put those swales at? Where are you going to dig a ditch if you need one? Where are you going to put these? When I mentioned reservoirs, I'm really thinking about like these. I mentioned a while back on a podcast, I was talking about a video I seen where they dug out all around their garden beds, these deep trenches, and they filled it with mulch. And it was basically, that wasn't so much a swale as it was like a reservoir that would seep. It functioned like a swale, but it would seep back into the garden bed areas, but it was really just collecting it. It wasn't really on a slope or anything necessarily. It was just flat, and it was collecting that water and holding it in the mulch and the wood chips. And like I said, they had these things like 3 feet deep, full of wood chips.
And you still haven't found that, huh?
I didn't. I forgot to look for it. But yeah, and so you would think how much water that would soak into those wood chips and then feed back into the beds that are next to it. And one thing for sure, you'd never have to worry about weeds in that much mulch growing up in your pathways, because they're using them as pathways. They were using those as pathways, the reservoir, everything right there. So it was definitely, you talk about function stacking. That's a really neat way to do it. A lot of work though, a lot of work up front, a lot of earthworks to put in something like that.
Yeah, if you plan ahead. Well, and the other thing too is this is with permaculture, it would be, you kind of have to be observing your property.
Yeah, you'd want to know what your needs were
coming from.
Right.
Like with us, our garage is right next to our garden, and for us, we've always said, we should be collecting water off of that. Garage roof. Yeah,
and like I said, your needs are going to be different wherever you live. Yep. Like I said, I think the people who were doing that, they were in a place that was prone to drought. So, that would be the perfect setup for something like that. It's really not necessary where I live normally.
Right.
It wouldn't be something necessary. But, a ditch could be. I have a friend who's got a property, and he has to be real careful. He puts gardens where he has tractors for his animals, rabbits and quail and chickens. And he has to be really careful where he tractors those, because if he's not paying attention and a big rainstorm comes, he could drown his animals, because that's how much water he gets on his property collecting. So, ditches would be really important on a property like that.
Just observing what your property, for us living on a hill, creates issues. For other people living on a flat piece of land creates issues. So, Yeah.
I also think it's a good time I love having ponds on my property. I've got a couple small ponds I've put in on my little property. When you're thinking about water, you're thinking about collecting water. A pond is great, and for a lot of reasons, but probably most is just for my soul. I just love to be sitting next to a little pond and watch the water flow through it, and just have that little this little habitat, a little wildlife habitat that you're creating, and it'll invite frogs and toads and snakes. It will invite, snakes are good for a garden.
A water feature. I actually love snakes. I know that's a hot topic for many homesteaders. I also don't live where we have poisonous snakes.
Right. Me neither. We have a lot. We do have some, but very few. It's mostly
we have a couple here, but it's very few. It's not like the American West where you have
most of the snakes we get here would be a blessing to a garden, because they're going to kill small rodents. They're going to get rid of insects, things like that, what they're going to eat.
Yeah,
so
when I see them here, they're usually gardener snakes, and I'm like, you can have all the rodents.
It's funny, you put a pond in, things just show up. We have bullfrogs, we have toads, we have snakes, you have things that just show up, and we're in town, but things just show up. So I love that it creates a habitat for wildlife that's inviting to your garden. You want some of that. We're going to talk a little bit about creating that in a little bit for habitat. But it's one of those things that does that. It also can create a microclimate in your garden, depending on where you put it. And if you're planting things around it, it's a thermal mass, so it's going to regulate temperatures better, and it can actually create a microclimate. So there's some benefits even there to having a pond.
Yeah, we live on a large pond. Basically, it's a small lake, and you go down the road and they'll have a frost, and we haven't, like tonight we have a freeze warning. It's unlikely we'll get a freeze because the lake creates a small microclimate for our property, but just in case, I still picked everything. So the water is great.
It's what I was mentioning about the by doing an aquaponics greenhouse and having that thermal mass in there, because what I want to do is dig into the ground and actually have my fish tanks in the ground, to where it'll create even more, it'll have even more thermal mass protection there, and then have it flowing, and the heat, some heat going in there also, but it won't take as much, I don't think, to heat it by doing it that way.
One of my mentors uses glass jars full of water for a thermal mass.
I've set milk jugs. I would fill milk jugs. I paint them black, fill them full of water, and set them in there. And I had them setting all over that greenhouse when I was trying to heat it in the wintertime. And I think it made a difference. You can set barrels in there. A lot of people do that, set barrels of water in there if you have a large greenhouse, and the thermal mass can definitely help. So, so having a pond does that. It creates a small thermal mass. Even a small decorative pond, if you're going to put gardens right in the middle of a garden or something, could do wonders for regulating temperatures. So I just love having them. I think it's a neat piece of infrastructure to put in, and it's nice to plan that out and know where you're going to have that before you start putting gardens in and have to rearrange everything. You mentioned in the notes fabrics. It's a good time to purchase your fabrics, have your fabrics on hand for your infrastructure. You go ahead and mention all the things you put down there.
Well, shade cloth, you can get it in varying different percentages is how they judge it.
Yeah, the thicknesses are your light, medium, and heavy weights.
Yeah, and I mean, you can use that up here. We don't need a ton of it because I'm, at the 45th parallel, but I did use it for my lettuces and stuff to stop it from bolting, because we do still get heat up here. But if you're down south, it will become even more important for you to have some kind of create shade somehow. I mean, you could use grapevines, but shade cloth works for that. And then I use row cover too.
Yeah, it became a good friend of mine last couple of years.
And in the fall to extend the season. But you can also use it for pests.
If you get the lightweight stuff, you could use it into the warmer days for sure. Yeah.
And you can get, we both have talked about trying to secure some netting, even just.
Yeah. Use the netting on row cover just to protect it. For the pest, birds and insects. Yeah.
And now is the time to probably start doing some research on it and finding which one you want and how wide you want it. Because they come in various widths. Those come in insulative values.
Yeah. And it's a good time to get your hoops ready. If you're going to purchase hoops or make your own, get those things done. And that way you have it come spring, it's ready to go. It's a good time of year to be planning out that infrastructure that you're going to be wanting to put in your garden when it's time. This is not something you're going to leave in your garden. It's not permanent infrastructure, but it's something it's nice to have it on hand when it's time.
And some people make those hoops to fit right perfectly over
raised
beds.
I've seen it. I even see people put them on hinges where they can hinge them over and flip them over. That's pretty neat. I've seen that. I thought about doing that.
I have too. Those look pretty cool. Yeah. So, the fabrics are a modern day tool that is just super helpful.
For sure.
Yeah. They used to use stuff in the old days like cloches. Am I saying that right? Cloches. They were glass.
The glass domes. Yeah. Right, now you can even get plastic ones too. Yeah. Then you're limited on it. Those are expensive for one thing.
Right.
Put them over each plant. And I've seen people make them out of cut the bottom out of a milk jug or a 2-liter bottle or something and put them on there.
Store them though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the fabric actually goes quite small. I actually stuff mine into boxes.
Yeah. I have a tote out there that I folded all mine up this year, put it in a tote, and it was good. I'm going to use it again next year. It's just fine. It'll last for quite a while.
If you are careful with it, and that's maybe this is part of infrastructure too. You can buy sandbags, so you're not tearing that fabric up. So you're going to want something like sandbags, or they do sell clips. I think.
You can get the clips that pop onto the hoops. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people use hoses where they take a piece.
Yeah, I've seen that too. That's
snap it over, but you're going to want either a smooth rock or some sandbags so they don't, because they will tear.
Yep. Yeah. I've used mine. I roll mine up with bricks on the sides, and the bricks can definitely tear it.
Yeah,
if you're not careful.
I may have tore some of mine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's all a good idea. I mean, it's nice to keep that stuff back and just, like I said, keep you some totes or some boxes or whatever, throw it in the winter, bring it back out in the spring, and just have that stuff on hand. And you can use it for several years.
Laid mine out on the grass and hosed it off, let it dry out,
Yeah, absolutely. A big one for me is building infrastructure that invites pest predators. Yeah. Some of those are other insects. Some of those are animals that you want on your property. We've mentioned it already with the pond, but there are some birds you want on your property. Birds eat a lot of insects. They eat a lot of bad insects. They eat the good insects too sometimes, but they eat a lot of bad insects. They can do a lot there. They can eat your garden too. Certain kind of birds will go more for your garden than they will for insects. You're trying to invite certain kind of birds. Marlins, wrens. There's just birds that are really they prefer eating insects other than your produce. So you're going to want to try to invite certain kinds of those kinds of birds around. You can do that by having bird houses, bird baths, bird feeders, bird things there that are there for them to bring them onto your property. And they'll. What was this you put down about bee water? I've seen you said, have you ever tried that?
I've never tried it, but I've seen where you can make like a bird bath and you put marbles in it.
Yeah, okay. I thought that's what you were talking about. I seen it in the notes.
And drink without drowning.
Yeah, we do. I do have one of the bird baths is set up like that. And the other birds, I find that, or the bees, rather we drink that water. I find that they're in the pond all the time. I got like I do have like the slate rocks around my pond, and a lot of those dip down into the water, and they'll crawl down those slate rocks and get right next to the water into my pond. So I see a lot of the bees next to my pond. Well, that was weird. I see my light. I had a light blow out. Did you see that?
I saw that.
It just like popped and went out.
Suddenly you're a little bit dark now.
Yeah, it just like blew all of a sudden. That light in front of me did. But yeah, so yeah, you think about watering your birds, watering your bees. We have a couple bird baths here, and I have to fill them up constantly because the birds are just in those things all the time. I mean, they're throwing the water out of them, but they love the bird baths. Having bats on your property. Some people get a little freaked out by bats, but bats are a wonderful creature to have on your property. And you can buy bat houses or build your bat houses. There's I'll put some links in the show notes for ones you can purchase, but there's also some DIY plans out there for building bat houses. They're not real complex. If you're a builder, you can build one pretty easy. I was looking at this is something I don't have on property is bat or owl house, an owl nest box. Yeah. And you can buy those also. You can build them. There's plans for building those also. But we were talking about this before we started the podcast, and we just love to have some owls on our properties.
Right.
If you have a natural if you have a natural habitat like a woods or something right next to your house, you probably have owls. But where I'm at, I don't, of course. So it'd be neat to try to bring them in. That would be cool to have a habitat that brings them in.
We have them at our property, and you hear them a lot at night. But here at our house, we don't have any.
It'd be neat to put
them, but you would have to definitely maybe put make sure your chickens are secure.
Yeah, they could. At night they would feed at night more often than days.
Yes, they do. Yep.
But yeah, so if you just had them up at night, they'd probably be fine. Yeah, but I would love. I'm curious. I wonder if I put up an owl house. An owl house. I wonder if they would come. I mean, if you build it, do they come?
Well,
I don't know.
They eat a lot of the smaller rodents.
Yeah, because they'd be great for like gophers and squirrels, like we were talking about earlier, trying to prevent squirrls.
I have squirrels and chipmunks.
Chipmunks, things like that. They were eating a lot of those things. So it'd be really beneficial to have owls on your property. I think.
A building project.
Always. Toad houses, building something that invites toads.
Those are something I think would be fun to bring the kids involved in.
Clay pots work good for that.
I saw
like a little opening.
Pictures of like people using clay pots and then just gluing, broken teacups and stuff.
Yeah, you can do that. You can use a little. You can make a little wooden. little wooden boxes or whatever, just place them around your garden, places for toads to get in there, because toads eat a lot of insects, and they can help clean up your garden a little bit there. So inviting those things.
Cool, dry place.
And snakes, if you got any kind of thick habitat that invites snakes, they like tall grass. They like, that kind of setup. They like my pond. I got a lot of tall shrubs and stuff around my pond, grass right there. They like being in those areas. Just if you're in an area that's inviting to, venomous snakes, you may not want them around. But in like where we live, it's a good thing to have around if you can bring them around. But I love inviting things on the property. And when I think about inviting things on my property, I'm also thinking about inviting pollinators on my property. There's some infrastructure that can invite them onto your property.
Do you have a mason bee house?
I do. I have a couple of them. I have a couple of them.
Okay.
There are some questions when you buy them, because a lot of times the ones that are store buy are made out of treated wood. So and they're saying don't get those and stuff. So you want to try to find them where they say they're made, not use any kind of treated wood or chemicals on the wood or anything. So you can't buy them. Just make sure that you're doing a little bit of homework before you buy them. They're not hard to make though.
They look pretty simple.
They are. There's different ones. You can drill the holes out, or you can actually get the reeds. You can go somewhere where you can find like the reeds and make them and stuff, make a frame and fill it up with reeds and replace those every so often. There's some DIY plans out there for those. We can put some in the show notes for how to make them, or I'll put a link in there. You can buy them, but I have a couple of them around here and they use them. It's amazing. I put them up. They filled up, like every single tube filled up. And I'm going to tell you, your native bees are actually better pollinators than honeybees, things like that.
That's what I've heard.
They're really good pollinators. So it's really great to invite things like that on your property, give them a place to live. Because they'll move into those little bee houses like that. They really will. The bee hotels.
We have an abundance of yellow jacket nests. Not my favorite bee, but we leave them for the most part, unless they're in an area where they're not leaving us alone.
And I just think having an area, even if you're in a small suburban or urban area, creating some natural habitat, have an area of your yard that you just kind of, you're planting things that are more natural, and letting it grow. And one of the ways you might do that is by actually planting out a pollinator garden. Planting plants and letting them grow thick in a thick area or whatever that you just dedicated to that, and with a focus on bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds, because those are really all really good pollinators. And there's plants that you can buy seed packs that have all the plants in there, and you just basically scatter them and let them grow, and you can fill up in a nice little area. And that's a good way to do it. But if you're trying to be a little more intentional and function stack your plants to where you want to get more use out of them, you can get plant stuff that will feed those, but also will benefit you. You can use a lot of herbs like echinacea and yarrow, and bee balm and milkweed, and you can use those things as well. But yet they're also good pollinator plants.
Our comfrey is, I think I see more bees on my comfrey.
The bumblebees here love the comfrey. They're on it constantly. So it's a good one to have. But we notice a lot more butterflies around here now, because we have milkweed and we have dill and fennel and parsley, and they love that stuff. We
have milkweed in abundance, and they just love.
And you can go on and plant butterfly weed, butterfly bush, Queen Anne's lace. They love those things too. If you want to have more of just a pollinator garden, they love those things. Hummingbirds are something we love. Most people are trying to drag them in by putting up hummingbird feeders, but that's not really the best way. The best way is to do it with a pollinator garden that's built for hummingbirds. And I think bee balm, daylilies, impatiens, hibiscus, petunias, they love those things. They'll come in and they'll
needs daylilies. I can mail them.
We have a lot of them here. That we have the tiger lilies and the daylilies, and they're edible. They're great. You can't, but boy, they're indestructible though. They will come back with a vengeance every year. And I think they divided ours to the point where we have nowhere really left to put them, because they're aggressive plants.
We have daylilies, tiger lilies. I did just get a different color because I'm tired of looking at the yellow and the orange, but
we got like
they
the
are
red
a good
and orange
investment, because you can just keep dividing the plants.
Yeah, you can, and they'll spread a little bit too. They'll walk around. They'll widen their area naturally.
And they taste pretty good in a salad.
Yeah, they're good. You ever fry them like a mushroom or something, like deep fry them or something? They're really good. They taste like a mushroom to me when you fry the flowers.
I've never tried them.
Yeah, you deep fry them, like batter them up, drop them in a skillet, and it's probably not the healthiest way to eat them, but they're delicious. They taste like a mushroom to me when you fry them.
I've only had them in like salads and stuff.
Yeah, they're great.
Pretty good.
They are. They are. So I just think that's a piece of infrastructure that you probably want to think about. Plan it out. Find an area dedicated to that, and that'll benefit the rest of your garden. It'll bring in these animals. It'll bring in these creatures that are going to be a great benefit to the rest of your garden. Pollinators, you want them around. And they're just nice to look at, too.
They are.
I love having hummingbirds and butterflies flying around.
It is. I love having the flowers mixed, too. Well, and the other thing that helps, I don't know about you, but I've noticed having the fruit trees.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of it. The cherry tree brings in a lot of things. Yeah. There's a lot of trees that bring in pollinators for that, too. So,
and a lot of garden problems that you see can be because you don't have enough pollinators. If you're having issues with like your corn, that corn is air pollinated, but some of the vegetables that are pollinated by pollinators like cucumbers and stuff, if you're not getting a lot of yield, sometimes it's because they're not getting pollinated.
Right.
And squash. Yeah.
It can definitely, especially if you're living in a city, say you're an urban homesteader, I mean, there could be a lack of those things unless you're trying to draw them in, So yeah, it's good to bring them around and do everything you can to bring them on your property and bring in the beneficial insects and the beneficial animals that will eat that insects, and it just creates this balance, this natural balance on your property. And this goes along with the question that was in our front porch, homestead front porch this week. And the person literally asked, do you do anything for pollinators? And these are the things that I do. I mean, we tried to bring little things, like I said, putting up the bee houses, planting some plants that they like. And it's done a remarkable job. Like I said, we see tons of bees here. I'm seeing tons of butterflies. I've seen more butterflies on my property this year than I've ever seen. And we're seeing quite a few hummingbirds too.
We saw hummingbirds. I think we had less, for some reason, we had less butterflies this year, but
I've definitely more than I've ever seen. Yeah. Swallowtail and the monarch, we're seeing a lot of those on the property this year.
Yeah. We didn't seem to see as much at our property in town. Now out at our other property, we've got a huge patch of milkweed. And we saw a lot of them. Yeah,
milkweed's just a good plant to have for them, and it's you're going to see a lot of action when you bring in those plants. They're going to show up. I mean, you just plant them, and they start showing up. So, plant up, even if it's just a small, maybe a 4x8 bed area or something. Put some of those plants, thicken it up, make a little natural habitat area that a few of these things can live in.
Where did I put? I think I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw where somebody made a teepee just out of logs or bigger branches, and they made they planted that into a little pollinator habitat.
Yeah,
it was really cute.
You could get pretty artistic with it, do some pretty neat things, and I've seen lots of people that build like the little bug hotels and stuff, trying to bring in like beneficial insects and things. And I mean, there's just so much you can do that none of it's real expensive. I mean, seeds for a pollinator garden, a lot of them are perennials that are going to come back every year. So you plant it once, you're going to have those continue to come back. So
I mean, my dill is not supposed to be a perennial, but it is.
Yeah, some of them, there's some that aren't there, but I think a couple, but most of them are. A lot of them are perennials, and you're going to just, like I said, plant once. And especially if you just keep that dedicated area, you can have a nice little nature habitat that's going to invite a lot of things, and it'll just bring in all kinds of good stuff to your garden. It's a good thing to have. So this is all infrastructure we just love to have. And you can tie all this together, you can build it in, and you don't have to do it all early on and right off the bat, but it's nice to think about steps and stages you're going to continue to expand and grow and add. I mean, there's all kinds of infrastructure you could get into beyond all this stuff, like garden sheds and greenhouses. And I mean, there's tons of things, but these are kind of like your little things that you just think about that you can start thinking, okay, I'm going to add this little garden. I'm going to add these few things. So it gets you started. And it's important things to think about. And this is a good time of year to think about it, because you can start sketching out your garden plan for next year. I know I've been doing a lot of that.
Ream all winter long. That's what
Yeah, so that's what we're here today to do, is just fill your head full of good ideas, so you can
in Australia.
Yeah, well, you can do it now. Now you're thinking, you're putting the garden in, so
now you can act on it.
Yeah, you're acting on it. So some of the stuff you can even act on now. I mean, you can go ahead and buy a lot of this material. You start making the stuff. Yeah, you can
Right.
definitely get to start digging your paths.
You can start some of the stuff if you're going to DIY it and you are heading into winter, you can start looking for things online.
Yeah, might be frugal and buy some stuff you can repurpose and use it that way. Absolutely. Yep. So good idea. Well, that's all I have for the show. Do you have anything else you want to add? We'll have links, by the way, of all this stuff. Anything that we have, like the DIY links, how to do some of this stuff, things you can buy. You got a conduit vendor in here, netting, we use deer netting, things like that. So we'll provide all that kind of stuff. Check out Rachel's website, rewilderlife.com. All her great blog posts she's putting up.
Your website was
redemptionpermaculture.com. Always lots of blog posts going up on there, so you can browse all the hundreds of posts there we have. Plus there's what is this, episode 157? So there's lots of podcasts listed, and they're all listed there, so you can go check them out.
And I think you had a blog post you mentioned a while. You had a blog post on using pallets
for raised beds,
right? But just that might be helpful for people, so they make sure they source good pallets. Yes,
I should have put that link. As a matter of fact, I will drop that link in the show notes for this too. Yeah. If you're going to use pallet wood, you want to use the right kind of pallet wood. There's some pallet wood that's treated, some have it. They have a stamp on the side of it that you can go by. I will drop a link in the show notes for this episode to check that out if you're going to use pallets for any projects, because some you don't want to use. Some are treated a certain way that you don't want near your food. Yeah. So I'll make sure. Yeah, good. Thank you for reminding me of that. I'll make sure I drop that in the show notes for this episode. Pallets are a great thing to get. Repurpose lots of things. For a lot of this products, you might even be able to use bricks. Things for your borders. Use lumber. Just all kinds of projects. And it's what I do. I look constantly for anything I can repurpose and use, because stuff's expensive. And I'm trying to build this stuff on a budget. So. Anytime you can get away with cheap, do it cheap. So that's all I have. Anything else you got?
I think that's it.
We appreciate y'all joining us this week, and we'll talk to you next week. Until then, happy homesteading and God bless.
And grow where you're planted.
Looking around, I finally see I think I need a change. The rat race, I want to flee. My world, I'll rearrange. I'm getting back to the roots of how it's meant to be. Growing gardens, picking fruit, racing livestock, living free. It's a modern homestead. Build a modern homestead. A lot of folks don't understand why I wanna live this way. They've never eaten from their land like we do here every day. Snapping beans like Grandma did, sitting on her front porch. Hunting and fishing like a kid once you've done all of your chores. It's a modern homestead. There's a way to make this change. You gotta start today.